Hi V, hi everyone else, I'm Sam. Welcome to Gaping Chasm. Welcome back to my series on Code Lyoko. If you missed parts 1 or 2, I will have them linked around the screen as well down below in the description. Parts 1 and 2 covered the first season of the show. Today I'm going to be stepping into season 2. We're going over the first half of this season, so that's 13 episodes. If you've never seen the show before, I do recommend giving at least the first part of my first video on this look-see, just because it does kind of explain the world and the characters and the groundwork that you need to know going in. I'm not going to be going over all that again. I'm just going to be talking about the episodes, assuming you know all of the lingo and everything. Season 2 aired in the United States from 2004 to 2005, and like season 1 is made up of 26 episodes. You can watch them online on YouTube for free. I will have the channel linked down below where I've been watching them and where you can also watch them. And I think they have the HD versions if you are a subscriber to Amazon Prime. So that's another great place to watch them. Also, major shout out to Code Lyoko.fr. They have been such an amazing resource. They're probably the biggest hub I've been able to find of online Code Lyoko content and fans, and it's sort of like an archive of everything that's been involved with the show. So I've found them incredibly useful and just really interesting to read through everything that they have, because seriously they have so much, and I'll definitely be talking about them more in later episodes, particularly when we get to the episodes where I talk a lot about the fandom and what it was like at the time and what it's like now. If you're interested in Code Lyoko at all, the background information, the production information, the fan content, the novels that were published, all of that, go check out codelyoko.fr. Great resource. And the majority of it has been translated into English, so yes. Season 2 is very different from season 1 in one distinct and important way. It has a plot. So season 1 had a plot, you know, fight Xana, save the day, save Aelita. Season 2 is where the real plot begins. It's not just fighting Xana and saving Aelita. It's this mystery about Xana and Lyoko and world building and having, you know, a more concrete goal of learning about Xana and turning it off and diving into how Xana was created, why Xana was created, how Aelita got there, what she's doing there, all that stuff. This all is begun being set out in season 2 because it was all created for season 2. After there was such a massive fan reaction to season 1, the creators and producers listened to what the fans wanted, and the fans wanted more lore, they wanted more explanation, they wanted a stronger through line, and so they created all of it at the beginning of season 2. So there is a much stronger through line moving forward in the show. Seasons 2 through 4 are like a continuous plot. I mean, obviously it gets extrapolated and changed and evolves, but it's one continuous plot line. And that's great, because season 1 lacking that is one of the weaknesses of the show. But seriously, all of the stuff that they're about to cover in season 2 forward didn't even exist in season 1. Maybe it was on the back burner of the creator's mind, but it's not present. That being said, there's nothing contradictory, because season 1 is so open-ended, or that's not the right word, because season 1 is so light on the lore and explanations and stuff. They didn't need to go back and retract anything. They just kind of added to the small tidbits that were given. They didn't even tweak anything. They just literally started giving answers and started doing something with the world that they had created. Season 2 is also when merchandising and toys and games and stuff all started coming out. I'm not really going to be talking about that at all today, because in the next video I really want to dive into the type of merchandising that was out there, what was popular, what people are collecting. I'm also going to try to get my hands on some Code Lyoko toys, but that might be very hard because they're kind of expensive on eBay. That being said, yes, season 2 is when the merchandising and such really started, when it got into gear. It was never super popular. I don't remember going to the store and seeing a million Code Lyoko toys, but I do remember seeing toys, and I remember, you know, me and all my friends in elementary school were big fans of it and stuff. Season 2 is Liftoff. Season 1 was that was a fun show. Season 2 is when it gets serious and when it gets really, really good, and is probably what a lot of us remember most fondly, because season 1 is very much like a prototype of where the show is going to go forward through. So every episode, this is something that dated back to season 1, would say there would be a title card where it would say episode whatever and then the title. So rather than starting at like episode 1 for season 2, again, like season 1 starts with episode 1, season 2 actually starts with episode 27. And I think that's a really neat trick. It's just sort of like a footnote really in the history of this, but it reminds me similarly to like the structure of Avatar or The Dragon Prince, where it's like really telling the viewer through the title cards and everything that this is one continuous story. Obviously Avatar calls it like book 2 chapter 1 or whatever, but yeah, there's just something really nice about them reminding us that they're not resetting, that they're constantly moving forward, something that season 2 really manages the entire time. I just thought that was nice. Episode 27, New Order. This episode throws us right back into it, except with a lot of new updates. There's a snazzy new intro, the music is the same, but there's a lot of new visuals taken from the new seasons. We also get to see in Lyoko that the Lyoko warriors have new vehicles to ride around, which are very cool and are one of my favorite additions to the show, so we don't have to watch them just running around all the time. We also see that Xana has created new monsters like the tarantula, which are a lot more frightening than the monsters that had existed. Not that they weren't frightening, but the addition of the new monsters this season is one of my favorite aspects of the show evolving, because the tarantulas and the scyphozoa are a lot more frightening than the blocks, in my opinion. It's also true that Xana has created these to actually be more powerful monsters for them to fight. So, you know, our heroes aren't just like leveling up continuously without having something decent to fight. They actually have an enemy that is on par with them. At the end of season 1, even though Aelita is in the real world, they make a fuss about how she'll have to stay in the tower anyways. They do go back on that sort of. They explain it. They say that Jeremy's created something to alert them better if monsters are attacking, if Xana is attacking. And so Aelita actually does spend most of her time in the real world getting to know real world things, which is a huge conflict for her because she does still miss Lyoko, and she's not completely comfortable in the real world. She's an outlier. So that is like an overarching theme that's going to be progressing through this season. But yes, Aelita is living in the real world. And in the real world, she gets a costume change from when we last saw her at the end of season 1, which is one of my favorite costumes. I think her outfit is so cute. Another through line that is introduced in this episode is William. He's a new student at the school, kicked out of his old school, and he quickly becomes friends with Yumi and starts hanging out with her, which puts a wedge in the Yumi-Ulrich relationship because William is clearly into Yumi. Like, as the series progresses, he doesn't try to hide it. He says to Ulrich, he's like, look dude, if you don't act on it, I'm going to, because I really like her. Okay, so there's a lot of new groundwork in episode 27, but there is actually a plot. On a field trip to some nearby woods, Aelita ends up alone and she's drawn to this abandoned house called the Hermitage, where she seems to be having memories, especially of an older man. Xana is watching her the entire time and ends up trapping her in the house. The rest of the group realizes she's missing. They also realize that Xana is attacking. Jeremy goes to the factory, not quite realizing that Aelita is in peril. The rest of the group goes to rescue Aelita. Both Yumi and Ulrich end up trapped in the house, but Odd and Aelita actually get out, and one of the memories that Aelita has is of a tunnel being right nearby that leads to the factory, so they take that. They save the day, same old there, but the group does acknowledge that her memories of the Hermitage are really strange. The fact that the Hermitage seems tied to the factory, what with there being a tunnel, it all seems to be pointing towards a new mystery. And the credits actually highlight this. Introductory credits changed this episode, but so do the end credits. We see sort of files being put down about a mysterious man. We see basically just like, it feels very like secretive and like we're looking at like files that we're not supposed to see. It's very cool. I'll like insert them here so you know what I'm talking about because I'm not explaining it well with my words. Episode 28, Uncharted Territory. Aelita spends a lot of this episode trying to adapt to her life in the real world, which is really difficult because A, Sissy is bullying her, and B, her friends have kind of left her to sink or swim. It's not their fault. They're trying to be like good, but they have other things going on, and Yeah, they just kind of leave Aelita floundering. All this leaves her feeling very upset. Understandably, she's overwhelmed, like things are not going well for her. So she runs away, goes back to Lyoko, which is her home. It's where she's from. The rest of the group ends up trying to look more into the Hermitage. They go back to explore. They find out that someone named Franz Hopper used to live there, so they start looking into him. At his library, they find a book on the Punic War, so they start looking at that. Like, it's very much an investigation episode. It also turns out that Franz Hopper worked at the school, which again continues the layers of this mystery. The group finds out that Aelita went to Lyoko, and so they go to try to get her back, talk to her, and she ends up kidnapped by this giant orb thing that they've never seen there before. It takes her away to somewhere else. With the book that he found at Franz Hopper's house, Jeremy is actually able to basically code in Lyoko so that the orb will come back and take Yumi, Odd, and Ulrich to the same place that it's taken Aelita. This is the 5th sector, which, side note, personally, I love the 5th sector stuff. That's one of my favorite pieces of the new plot that's introduced in season 2 is the 5th sector, because it feels so much more like a video game, and it feels a lot more challenging for our characters, and they don't overuse it. Like, it's not in every single episode, it's just there every once in a while to kind of tease you at this like greater adventure type thing. So yes, I love the 5th sector. As a kid, I would always play that I was like in the 5th sector when I played like Lyoko, you know. In the 5th sector, they find that there's like a countdown going on, and there's a lot of Xana's monsters, and the rooms keep shifting if you don't like get through the countdown at the right time. But there's also something called the Schiphiozoa, which basically is attracted to Aelita and attacks her and is trying to take her memories away. So the Schiphiozoa is a major threat. And if they can basically press the button before the countdown ends, then okay, they're safe. But if Aelita spends too much time with the Schiphiozoa, she loses all her memories, and it's, you know, not good. They do rescue her, and they get out of the 5th sector before they really learn too much about this new area, but they know, okay, new threat. Franz Hopper has something to do with Lyoko and Xana. They're not sure what. Like, that's a big deal. They do spend time at the end of the episode kind of being like, I'm sorry, Aelita, we did kind of just hang you out to dry, didn't we? We're not great friends. So, you know, some conclusion there as well. Although she really does spend this season kind of struggling to be normal or feel normal in this new world, or new to her world. Episode 29, Exploration. So the group plans to go to the 5th sector to try to explore it, find out more mysteries. But in the real world, Yumi's parents have started to get really suspicious. The fact that she's really not spending that much time at home. She seems to leave at odd hours, you know, and I really like this. So I didn't actually mention this. This season introduces another new character besides William, which is Yumi's younger brother. And he doesn't do much for the plot, at least not in this point in the story, but he does add a lot of... He adds an element of draw to Yumi's family and like fills it out and really gives that whole family unit more of a personality and a character, gives Yumi a little bit more to like fight for. And Yumi's family being suspicious of her is kind of like a trend that started a little bit in season 1, but like is definitely a thing in season 2. And I really like that there are more real world consequences, which we're gonna get to in the next episode that I talk about, because you'll see something that makes me really happy. But yeah, just Yumi's family is suddenly much more of a consequence and not a burden, but like a hurdle to get around. And I like that, because the fact that the other 3 or 4, now that Aelita is in the real world, are living at a boarding school, just sneaking out past teachers, like sure, that's a hurdle, but it's not the same as, you know, sneaking out past your parents and lying to them. And the lying to them also does weigh on Yumi. Getting ahead of myself though. So her parents become suspicious of her, and basically they're like, no, you can't go out all the time. You have to spend time with your family. We're going to walk you to school. We're going to pick you up from school. All these things. It's not quite a grounding, but it's like just about there. So the group does go to the 5th sector. Without Yumi, they're a little like, oh, do we want to risk it with like one person down? But they're like, why not? We'll try it. And they do not turn the timer off in time. Both Ulrich and Odd end up being devirtualized, which should be fine, except they realize they need a different code to bring them back to the real world now that they've been devirtualized in the 5th sector. So Aelita is hanging out in the 5th sector, trying to hang on. The Schiphiozoa is on its way, ready to attack, and so Yumi is called in. She sneaks out in the middle of the night and she goes to the 5th sector. She saves the day. It's great. Yumi continues to be a badass. and her and Aelita book it. They basically are given like a pathway out of the 5th sector to like the edge of the 5th sector. It's like an orb basically. And out there they discover a like interfacing structure, I don't know what else to call it, where Aelita interfaces with it and she finds out the 5th sector is where Xana lives. So when they beat the 5th sector, beat the code, and they can get out to this interfacing unit, Aelita can actually go into Xana's code, learn more about him, learn more about Lyoko, learn more about all this stuff, which is awesome. The caveat being, Xana is sending monsters to attack them actively, and also Jeremy can't do anything while Aelita is interfacing with this, so he can't help them from the outside. She really only has a few minutes, if that, not even like seconds, to really interface. So this time she is able to get the code to bring, you know, everyone back from the 5th sector once they devirtualize, and then her and Yumi escape. They bring back the devirtualized friends, everything ends up okay, but because Yumi's parents have discovered that she snuck out in the middle of the night, they're mad, they do a return to the past. And that's how the episode ends. Episode 30, A Great Day. This one feels a lot more like season 1 episodes because they're not, you know, investigating the mystery of Franz Hopper going to the 5th sector. Basically, it's Xana attacking by causing them to continuously return to the past, which is really frustrating and has like a Groundhog Day effect to it. And I really like that setup for the episode. Like, I love that they're using this element against our main characters. So Xana is sending them to the past, and it's kind of a race against time resetting itself to get to Lyoko and deactivate the tower. They do. It is a really tough fight. And they also have to worry about Sissy, who has a recording of Aelita saying that she's not who she really is. Sissy's like threatening to reveal this to the principal even though she doesn't understand what it means or anything. They have to deal with that too. And they do fight Xana. It's a tough fight. They win. They deactivate the tower. And then they find out, and this makes me so happy, they find out that every time they're returning to the past, it actually grows Xana's strength. So they have to stop doing it, which is a win because, you know, I hated how much they leaned on this mechanic in season 1. So now they can't lean on it as much. It's still something they can use, but every time they use it, it means that Xana gets stronger. Episode 31, Mr. Puck. The episode starts off with Aelita having a nightmare, and it's actually been seeded a few episodes earlier where she's having nightmares about this little elf type creature person who has like a passing resemblance to Aelita when she's in Lyoko, where this elf is like running in the woods from some wolves and has to hide. So the group decides, let's go back to the Hermitage where all these visions and nightmares seem to have started from and investigate. While they're there, Aelita is acting a little strange. She's remembering like weird things. She's having more thoughts about the elf. And basically these visions lead them to a hole in the wall where she finds a little stuffed animal, which is the elf she's been dreaming about. She knows its name is Mr. Puck and they take it home. And it seems to have like some sort of value to her. It's very unclear at this point. In class, they actually discover that on Mr. Puck is a key. They take the key to the train station where there's a locker, and in the locker they find a briefcase full of CDs left by Franz Hopper, which is very exciting and moves their investigation forward. It's not like easy, like, oh, here are all the answers, but it's like a step in the right direction. The next day, Xana attacks, because of course Xana attacks, and possesses Jeremy. After trying to possess Ulrich and Odd, but it doesn't work, later the group theorizes it's because Ulrich and Odd have built up an immunity to Xana, having fought in Lyoko. But anyways, Xana possesses Jeremy and has him kidnap Aelita. From that point forward, it's, you know, the same old, same old. They go to Lyoko, save Aelita from the Schifozoa, deactivate the tower, save the day, but of course, no return to the past. So they do have to live with the consequences, including the fact that Xana tried to destroy all of Franz Hopper's CDs that they had just found. Episode 32, St. Valentine's Day. So this is one of the weaker episodes of the season. There's not that much to talk about, and it's very cringy, although to be fair, St. Valentine's Day is pretty cringy for middle schoolers and high schoolers, so I mean, you had to know it was gonna be when there was an episode called St. Valentine's Day. Basically, Xana gives Aelita a necklace. She thinks it's from Jeremy. She puts the necklace on. It allows Xana to mind control her. She goes to Lyoko and is heading towards the Schifozoa, and the group figures out what's going on. They go to Lyoko. They save her. They save the day. Same old, same old. Yeah, the most notable thing is just how cringy the episode is. Episode 33, Final Mix. This is another one that doesn't have a lot to talk about, mostly because it's, again, more typical of like what an episode would be in season 1, although of course it does have a lot more layers and is developing the characters, which season 1 did not do too much. Like, this episode actually works to develop Aelita and William as characters. The Xana plot is that Xana takes over Jim, kidnaps Aelita, tries to send her to Lyoko for the Schifozoa, everyone saves the day. Okay, that's fine. That's the same. But the real world plot is that there's a techno party happening, and Aelita actually finds out that she's very good at DJing and she really likes it. So I like that. I like the plot where she's like developing this hobby and having a good time and expressing herself and really learning to like be a person. I thought that was great. William is also at the party, so his character really gets dived into a bit more. He's developed a bit more, and that's also really nice because, yeah, I like the development of character. The only other thing like notable about this episode is that they do have to do a return to the past in this episode, and it is the first time in a while since they figured out that it makes Xana stronger. And I mean, as much as I hate the return to the past being overly used, it was kind of like, I don't know, a little like refreshing that they used it again, because, you know, a little nostalgia right there. Episode 34. Missing link. In Lyoko, Xana uses a Schifozoa, this time to attack Yumi, and he's able to steal some of her DNA so that she can't devirtualize. Of course, the group goes to the 5th sector, where they're able to go to that interfacing unit and get the DNA back for her by the end of the episode, so she is able to devirtualize back in the real world. What's more interesting is the B plot. And I haven't talked a lot about Sissy this season because she just isn't as around this season. She's not necessarily one of the main antagonists, although even though she's not as like active as she was in season 1, she's worse in season 2. Like, she's so much more of a bitch in season 2. She's just meaner. That being said, the B plot. It's picture day, and because Yumi can't devirtualize, she can't be there, which means she'll probably get suspended, which means her parents will get told. Anyway, it'll be, you know, rolling consequences that would be bad to deal with. So Ulrich approaches Sissy and he's like, would you be willing to pose as Yumi for picture day? Because they're different grades, so she could do Yumi's picture. And Sissy agrees. She's like, sure, I'll do it. And she does it for free. And it's like a nice gesture. Like, there's not any, in this episode at least, there's not like a double-edged sword thing. She's just like, yeah, I'll do it. She actually ends up being really horribly bullied for the picture. Like, people are like, you're not Yumi, you're Sissy. And her dad gets involved, and it's kind of really embarrassing for her, and I feel really bad for her. You know, like, oh, that's rough. She was doing a nice thing, and she gets bullied. But even in the end, she's like, yeah, no, I took care of it. Yumi will not get in trouble for missing picture day. And she's like, I did it for free. And yeah, it was just a really good B-plot to see Sissy being selfless for once, and the group being like, hey, she's actually helpful and not a horrible person. Episode 35, The Chips Are Down. So this continues the Ulrich Yumi story. I haven't talked a lot about it in the recap so far, but there is this tension between the two of them. You know, the will they, won't they thing continues, although it seems like both of them are leaning closer to the will they, except William is in the way. And it's very clear that William is also interested in Yumi and that he knows Ulrich is interested in Yumi, and yeah, he's okay with getting in between that if Ulrich's not gonna do anything. And Yumi does kind of like William, although she does seem to feel a little like slightly uncomfortable every time he tries to make advances. So this continues that tension a little bit. Basically, Yumi's father has just lost his job, and there's a lot of fear that they might have to move back to Japan, which Ulrich freaks out about. Like, Yumi's not happy, the group's not happy at this idea that she might have to leave, but Ulrich is terrified to lose her. Understandably, because he is in love with her. So Ulrich devises a plan to try to get them to stay, and he hears the winning lotto tickets on the radio, then goes back in time, then buys a lottery ticket, and then gives the lottery ticket to the Ishiyamas and is like, keep it, just a gift, I heard you lost your job. Of course, then it's the winning lotto ticket, and they're like, oh my god. And it's actually really sweet. The family's like, Ulrich, you should have it. You just won this amazing prize. Like, we can't take this. The group had realized that they'd been sent back in time. They didn't really understand why it was happening, and Ulrich pretended like he didn't know either. But after her family wins the lottery, Yumi realizes Ulrich sent us back in time. She tells the group confronts him, they're pissed, they're like, Ulrich, how dare you? You know that makes Xana stronger. And they basically tell him he's not welcome in Lyoko anymore. Then Xana attacks, possesses Nicholas, the group goes to Lyoko, but in the end, it's Ulrich who has to save the day because he was the only one not in Lyoko at the time. Well, that was fun. Where did I leave off? So he goes, he saves the day. End of story. Although, realize resolution, Yumi's father does actually find another job, so all is good. Episode 36, Marabunta. So B-plot wise, this continues the Yumi, William, Ulrich love triangle angst fest thing going on. And while that's interesting, the shining gem of this episode is Xana. So, Jeremy creates, with the help of some notes from Franz Hopper, a program called Marabunta that will take out Xana's monsters on Lyoko by basically spreading across the different sectors and wiping out the coding for the monsters. Aelita and Odd go to Lyoko to see how it's working, and it's all fine until it turns out that the Marabunta is reading the virus inside Aelita as something to wipe out. Aelita and Odd try to go to one of the towers to escape, but the Marabunta keeps blocking them. So Xana sends some monsters to help. Eventually, Ulrich and Yumi will join them, but first, Xana's monsters arrive inside with the Lyoko warriors to protect Aelita and try to defeat the Marabunta. It's actually sweet and kind of heartbreaking because some of them die like protecting the Lyoko warriors, and you're just like, never would have felt fond for them, but oh my god, they're just like sacrificing their lives or whatever to save Aelita, because if Aelita goes, Lyoko goes. The monsters fight side by side with the Lyoko warriors to protect Aelita and try to defeat the Marabunta. Like there's one scene where a crab sacrifices itself, and I was just going like, oh no. Like, my reaction was just so like heartbreaking. With Xana's help, they are able to defeat the Marabunta. Odd gets to be the real MVP in that he fires like a single arrow that takes out the single thing that they needed to take out. Pretty badass scene. And then Xana leaves, not before bowing themselves out, and the heroes fix it, you know, they stop the coding, and the episode wraps. So yes, Marabunta might be my favorite episode of the first half of season 2, just because it's like so different and so awesome, and seeing the team work with Xana is like, it's awesome. I love when the villains and the heroes team up. It's great. Episode 37, Common Interest. Objectively, this is a good episode, but I personally just could not get into it. I couldn't get into it. I wasn't focusing at all while I was watching it, and I don't think it was my fault. There wasn't like other things going on. I was just like having a hard time engaging with it. The episode feels really tired and old, and even though it's introducing elements and being kind of fresh and actually kind of playing on the Xana and the Lyoko warriors teaming up idea, it was not engaging to me. Basically, Xana possesses this master criminal and is committing crimes, but there's something going wrong with the super calculator, so Xana keeps losing possession of him. At the same time, because of these issues, Aelita is being hurt, and so again, because Xana can't lose Aelita, or they lose Lyoko, they kidnap Jeremy, basically, and just force him to fix the super calculator. The group goes to Lyoko, deactivates the tower, they ends up fine. Episode 38, Temptation. This is another one that, like, objectively, good episode, and it pushes along Jeremy's character and Franz Hopper's stuff quite a bit. But it felt dull, especially compared to the first episodes of the season, where so much new stuff is happening and it's so interesting and there's so much going on and they're just really great episodes. This one, I don't know, it felt like an episode they weren't putting as much effort into, which is fine. You don't have to put, well, I was gonna say you don't have to put the same amount of effort into every episode, but if you want it to be a good show, you probably should. Anyways, it's just, for me, not the most exciting episode. You know, they go to Lyoko, save the day from Xana's attacks, all that. The only thing you really need to take out of this episode is that Jeremy has kind of been obsessing over Franz Hopper, and he discovered a way to increase his brain power by causing them to return to the past multiple times. This has a really negative effect on his character, though, like health-wise and just stability-wise. He's not doing well. He really wants to find a way to deactivate Xana, though. It's like a major plot point, obviously. By the end of the episode, though, he figures out that he's been doing it wrong and he's just ended up hurting himself for no good. And he admits that Hopper's stuff is out of his league. The team agrees, and it's like a major moment of growth for Jeremy, I will say that, because he sees himself as not like undefeatable, but I don't know, a little out of everyone else's league, I guess. And it's nice to kind of see him, not necessarily taken down a peg, but realizing his own limitations. And the mid-season finale, episode 39, A Bad Turn. So there's a lot of things I like about this episode, particularly the Lyoko-centric plot. The B plot in the real world is more Ulrich, William, Yumi stuff. Although Ulrich and William do work together a little bit in this episode, and it's kind of badass because they're both really good fighters. So Xana attacks by sending one of his crabs into the real world, which you know I love. I love seeing the monsters not only in the real world but just like drawn in the 2D animation. I think it's really cool. And he also ends up destroying all the scanners. Only one person is able to get through. Aelita. So Aelita really gets to shine in Lyoko and just be a badass and save the day, which she does because Aelita is the best. I love her so much when she gets to shine in Lyoko, especially because she's not such an offensive character. She's defense oriented, if that. So yes, watching her just like own Xana in this episode was great. Not gonna lie, she more or less single-handedly saves the day. That being said, as much as I like the Lyoko plot, this episode isn't, like, there's not that much going on. It's just a really standard episode, which is fine because even though it's like the mid-season finale, it wasn't a mid-season finale. The show continued on. So yeah, it wasn't much of like a mid-season finale, but that's, you know, expected for this show. It's kind of a shame because at least at the end of season, or at the midpoint in season 1, it did feel a lot more like a turning point. If you remember back in season 1, the mid-season finale was episode 13 and Jeremy thought he had a way to dematerialize Aelita. It probably could have worked, except that in Lyoko, Yumi gets dematerialized permanently and they have to use that technique to then bring her back. So like that one had a lot of like emotional climax, whereas this episode just didn't. So it's a little bit of a shame there. Overall though, season 2 is so much better than season 1 because they have a plot now. Like, they've got something they're working towards. It's nice, it's good. It's a shame that they didn't have this in season 1. Like, it's a shame that they weren't thinking ahead far enough because yeah, it really would have benefited from it. So things I've noticed, changes, I've talked a lot about them like as I went through the episodes. I do want to say, while the beginning of the season, it feels like they're breaking the mold of the pattern, what I think they're actually doing is just changing the pattern. Now they have the 5th sector, and they have the Schizozoa, and different monsters to play with, but more or less it's just kind of created its own new pattern that plays within the rules of the old pattern. So, you know, there is still the A plot of Xana attacking or something Xana related. It could also be like Franz Hopper related, but it does always come back to Xana being the villain. And then there's a B plot, which now has a lot more focus on like character driven things. You know, a lot of the tension comes from between Ulrich and William, and Ulrich and Yumi and William, as well as Yumi and her family, and Aelita and the real world. And Jeremy and Aelita actually have some tension this season. They fight a little bit, which I think is really cute because in season 1 they talk about how they never fight. But it's like now that she's here in the real world and she's much more of a person, they do fight and they butt heads a bit, but that doesn't make their relationship anything less than it actually is. So I do think that's nice. And I do like that the B plots are structured a lot more around the characters rather than just like, oh, this event is happening because we need a B plot. Although that does still happen occasionally, it's mostly character driven. And because they've added this overarching story, there's more that happens in each episode. The episodes feel more full, like there's, you know, like almost like time is distorting. Like sometimes I feel like you're watching a half-hour show, but so much is happening that it feels like it was actually an hour-long worth of content. And I really like that. I like that this show is finally getting a handle on that, you know. They're finally feeling thick and full and plump and full of stories, and the 2 episodes that I mentioned I was really disappointed in just had a lack of that. So this show really is shining with its storytelling, but anytime it trips up, it is like doubly bad because you've been primed at this point to expect it to be like so good and so thick of plot, so that as soon as it's not, it's just dull. And that is kind of a shame because there's something nice about the simplicity in season 1. Something else I really like about this season is because they're filling out the episodes, there's room for like smaller stories kind of happening in between. Like there's something happening between Jim and Mrs. Hertz and it's just like, wonder what that's about. But it's cute. It's nice to have these like little like anecdotal like peeks into people's lives. I like that. I like that they're having more fun with the side characters. And I like that even though they never really fill out the cast like as wide as it could get, I've compared it to Miraculous Ladybug in the past, how they seem to really fill out that cast of characters in those episodes. Code Lyoko doesn't do that, but the introductions of William and Hiroki, who's Yumi's brother, do help. They do make it feel like a bigger world, even if just by a tiny little bit. As does Franz Hopper and everything that regards that. That makes the world feel so much more, not real, but like cemented in reality, I guess, in a way that it just was kind of lacking originally. And hints at, you know, there's this Xana thing is bigger than these teenagers, you know. There's this guy who created it or has to do with it, like they're not sure, so it's nice to have the Franz Hopper plot. Also because I love mysteries like this, so it's nice to have for that reason too. One thing that's a little bit of a shame is most of Xana's attacks this season are possessions. And I get that that's probably like the most effective way to attack our characters, but it's also really boring to just be like, oh, now Nicholas is possessed, now Jeremy is possessed, now Jim's possessed. Like, oh, ha ha ha, yes, scary that Xana can do this, but like, how boring. In season 1 you had those like really fun ones, and like they could be scary too, like the rats episode, and just lacking that is, it's kind of like a lacking creativity on Xana's part. Like that was kind of fun about Xana, to have them just like be devious enough to be like, yes, I'm gonna possess this teddy bear and make it rampage around town. Like we've lost that kind of with season 2. And of course the CGI, which is amazing. It has come so far since season 1, and the gap, you can tell even between the end of season 1 and the beginning of season 2 how much nicer it looks. It's so much more fluid. Things in the 5th sector look awesome. The battle sequences are amazing. I have no complaints. It is phenomenal how far the CGI has come, and yeah, fully happy about it. Alright, that is it for me. I'm not sure. I just finished recording it and it feels like it's gonna be a shorter video than my Code Lyoko videos have been in the past. I'm not actually sure because like editing that could change. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you are enjoying remembering this show with me. It is a lot of fun. Season 2 is leaps and bounds beyond season 1. And we're just going to continue with season 2 and wrap it up in the next video, which hopefully will be out sooner than later. If you like this content, do not forget to like and subscribe. This will be in a playlist with the other Code Lyoko videos if you want to watch that. And as I said at the beginning, if you want to watch the episodes themselves, they're for free on YouTube. I will have that linked down below, as well as the HD versions in Amazon Prime. Goodbye V, goodbye everyone else. I'm gonna go have lunch.